Welcome to Business Innovators Radio, featuring industry influencers and trendsetters sharing proven strategies to help you build a better life right now.
Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Business Innovators Radio. I'm your host, Donna Gunter. Today we have with us Dr. Artika Tyner, author of The Leader's Journey, a guide to discovering the leader within. Leadership is a journey often mistaken for a destination. The Leader's Journey provides guidance and inspiration for that journey. Reading this book will provide the reader with inspiration on how to lead effectively, build new bridges, and establish a vision for the future. This is the foundation of leadership growth. In 3 parts, the book explores core values of leadership and how these values inform your understanding of leadership. This is the beginning of knowing. Dr. Artika Tyner is a passionate educator, author, sought-after speaker, and advocate for justice. At the University of St. Thomas College of Education, Leadership, and Counseling, Dr. Tyner serves as a public policy leadership professor. She trains graduate students to serve as social engineers who create new inroads to justice and freedom. Her research focuses on diversity, inclusion, community development, and civil rights. Welcome to the show, Artika.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here today.
Well, Artika, I often ask this question to people on my show who have written books such as you have. What was your reasoning for writing this particular book?
For this book, I was excited to start to think about how to lead change. In a practical sense, there can be plenty of issues that we can see around us, whether it's addressing the achievement gap and educational disparities, or maybe it's criminal justice issues, or maybe it's more at the micro level of an issue within an organization or possibly a family conflict. I just wanted to know what are some of these strategies to address conflict, but at the same time, how to look at it in a practical way as it relates to leadership and using your influence to problem solve and bring forth change.
Well, Artika, you mentioned something that I'm not that familiar with. You've talked about the achievement gap there. Can you talk a little bit more about that and how that applies to leadership?
Well, one of the challenges that we see nationwide is looking at some of the educational challenges facing young people. For instance, the Schott Foundation, and this is where my passion initially started with reading one of their reports on academic achievement related to Black boys. Now, in most states across the nation, an African-American boy has about a 50-50 chance of completing and receiving his high school diploma. And when I thought about that, it really stood out to me because I thought, in looking at the data, that it would be closer to 100%, especially in knowing that we're in a globalized economy and the importance of education today. So when we look at the terms of achievement gap, which I like to refer to as the opportunity gap, it's really addressing those challenges, looking at the raw data related to educational achievement and saying, what can we do to make sure we unveil the talent of each young person, and also ensuring that we provide them with the tools not just to succeed academically, but also for those young people. I think it's a chapter of leadership, because I think we all have the opportunity to use our influence to make an impact, but oftentimes it's that leader within us may be lying dormant, like a sleeping giant. But I believe as community members, as educators, not only can we empower young people, we also can explore ways to empower ourselves to make a difference in the world.
Can you go into a little bit more detail about that, both empowering young people as well as empowering ourselves around this whole issue?
Well, with empowering young people, one of the first messages that I give them, it starts with just raising a basic question of what is in your hands to make a difference in the world? Because oftentimes I think as educators, as parents, as community members, as mentors, when we look at young people, we oftentimes look at them like a metaphor of an empty pitcher, and we're just going to pour in knowledge, pour in information. But in a lot of ways, my experience with young people, and I must admit my passion has always been in serving as an educator, has been really that oftentimes for young people, the pitcher is already full. And when I say that it's full with an abundance of gifts, talent, inquisitive mind, curiosity, but really cultivating and unleashing that potential. Now, if you take that metaphor more broadly beyond young people, are we empowering others within our organization to use their strengths at work? Are we empowering other community members? One of the things that I challenge my students to do and think about is when we see a problem, we create solutions. So whether we see a problem related to educational issues, or I have a number of students who work on healthcare issues, things like maternal health, how do we make sure that both mothers and babies are, safe and healthy during the childbearing season? Those realities of problem solving around everyday problems, instead of saying, oh, that's too bad or that's too sad of what's happening in the world around us, how do we activate leadership in our daily lives is really the challenge.
Well, Artika, a lot of what I've heard about millennials indicate that they're really, I guess, more turned inward, working on themselves as opposed to working on world change. Has that been true in your experience?
Based upon my experience with working with millennials, I think they're really looking to find their passion. For many of them, it's figuring out how they can make an impact, because oftentimes the message is, well, leadership is about a position or a title. But what I have really challenged millennials to think about is that leadership is really about the power of influence. What are those issues that you're passionate about, and how can you use your skills, whether it's a college student? I was just meeting with some of our engineering students and some of the work that they're doing to provide access to solar energy or to work on environmental justice issues. So I think in that sense, it's really for our millennials connecting their passion and skills to everyday issues.
Well, that's really refreshing to hear. My background is in higher education administration, and I've been out of the field now since about the mid-1990s. And at that time, when I worked in higher ed, which was from about the mid-'80s to the mid-'90s, it seems like college students, the college I was at in particular, I guess, were all about the partying and seemed to focus very little on the academics, only maybe when it got to be their their junior or senior years, when they actually could see graduation and they were having this, oh my gosh, I guess I'm supposed to be graduating, where are my grades kind of experience.
Yes, I believe young people today are looking for more in the sense of looking to engage the world, especially if we look at something as simple as social media. Social media has torn down a lot of borders. We can connect with people all over the world with just a few, types or clicks on our phones or on our computers. So with that, I would say for a lot of millennials and young people more broadly, the world's challenges are a part of their challenges today.
Yeah, social media has brought a lot of that essentially to our doorstep, and that's got both its good and bad components. I'm very fortunate in that not only social media but the internet has let me live in a very rural part of Texas and connect with people, like you, all over the globe that I would not have normally gotten to connect with. So I can only imagine, based on my own experiences, the impact that would have on high school and college students today.
Yes, I think it can be a very empowering tool. And in fact, I had the opportunity this past summer to teach at a university in China in the World Academy for the Future of Women. And it was just powerful to see how young people were engaging themselves around service projects and working in the community. And primarily the tool that they had used is a mobile app called WeChat. It has some of the same or similar features to Twitter or a hybrid of Facebook, but using that to communicate about the projects that they were working on, to share, their triumphs and to share their challenges. I believe that social media can really be used as a tool to get people organized, informed, and engaged. And with using social media, there's one campaign that I recently launched, which is the Leadership for Social Justice campaign, with the goal in mind of challenging 10,000 people around the globe to talk about how they will lead change. So I have people out there with their selfies being posted across Instagram and all the social media outlets, really showing how everyday people cannot just look at a problem, but get involved and get engaged to make a difference.
Oh, that's fascinating. Are you planning on writing a paper about this, or maybe your next book on this whole project? I think it would be a great read.
Oh, wow. Well, thank you for the idea. Yes, I've been compiling the information built from my trip in China and teaching at CIAS International University, and also my trip the year before in Tanzania and making connections there with the professors and students at the University of Arusha.
Oh, that's amazing. You've gotten to do all this travel around this issue. That's just awesome. Well, we've got a lot of entrepreneurial types listening or listeners to this podcast, and I want to talk a little bit about how people who own businesses, especially if they've got team members, whether they're employees or contractors, can foster leadership in the people with whom they work.
Well, I would start off with just one notion to begin the conversation, is related to leaders as learners. So with that notion, I would challenge entrepreneurs within their organizations to think about learning opportunities for their staff or their consultants that they're working with. So for me, a part of the work that I also do is developing leadership modules that focus on what are the important skills that you need to lead, like listening skills, problem-solving skills, emotional intelligence. Do you know how to work with other people? And also helping each team member unveil their strengths. Because one of the things that stood out to me in reading the Strengthsfinder book and some of the data related to that particular study was that there was over 1 million people surveyed across the world. And what stood out to me was that at least 80% of people are not working in their strengths area on a daily basis. So all of a sudden that changed the way that I led within my organization to start thinking about what are the strengths, the unique skill set that each employee brings to bear, that they bring to the table, and really cultivating those and setting them in motion to use and leverage to reach your shared mission or goals. So I think investing time in the training and investing time in assessing the assets within your organization.
Well, I guess doing some kind of assessment like that might discover that somebody's really in the wrong job if his or her strengths are in a completely different area, and maybe that's why the person has been struggling a bit in the position if it's not catering, if the task and the position aren't catering to that person's strengths.
That's definitely a possibility, and it also could be something where you would realize that there may be some strength that you never cultivated. Like for my team, all of a sudden, I'll admittedly tell you, using the computer and the technology skills are not my strong suit. But when we started to do this assessment and have a different type of conversation, I found and discovered that a few of my colleagues, it was really their passion. So not only were they able to educate me on the latest technology, they also were able to help our organization with branding and also helping to market our vision as well. So sometimes I think we miss out on the strengths because we never take inventory. So I would encourage entrepreneurs to really do almost similar to what we do with community assets maps, to do something like that within their organization to bring together all the skills that they have available and then have a listening session related to the vision and how those skills can help advance the vision of a particular organization.
Well, Artika, how can people recognize their strengths? I ask this question because this is, my own discovery process. A number of years ago, I would talk about technologically related things, which is something that I've got a gift for, something that I have an aptitude for, but it seemed kind of like common sense to me, and I didn't realize that everybody else couldn't do it until I happened to go to a networking meeting and was talking about putting together an email newsletter, and this has been, like 15 years ago, but had so many people come up to me and say, oh my gosh, you've got an email newsletter? Well, can you do that for me? And I thought, gosh, isn't everybody doing an email newsletter? I mean, I didn't see it as a strength. I just thought everybody knew how to do that. So do you have any great tips for people to figure out what their strength is, what their gift is, when they may view it as commonsensical like I did and think, well, doesn't everybody know how to do this?
That's a wonderful question. And exactly if you use your particular example, one of the things that I did on my own leadership journey and discovery process is I started to begin to ask people. I even asked my parents, like, what are the things that you noticed about me that I was good at from a very young age? Now, my mother, she was very candid. She was like, you can't tell what it is? I'm like, well, what is it? She was like, I feel like you were talking since you were born. And I said, oh, okay. Like, okay, understood. But really what she was saying is that I enjoyed being relational, connecting with people. No matter where I am, at the grocery store, at the car wash, at the dentist, I enjoy connecting with people. So all of a sudden, if you look at that as a strength, really that's allowed me to be very successful in serving as a role as a mediator and a facilitator and problem solver in all the organizations that I've been a part of. It also allowed me in my own pursuits of my Leadership Institute to have the skills to be able to talk about what leadership means and to do the training. So I think one first practical way is kind of ask people around you, what are those things that you think that I'm naturally good at? What have you seen? What have you witnessed on? What are those things that I do effectively just naturally as well? And I also encourage opportunities for reflection. Now, my second book is a tool that really focuses on what does reflection look like in identifying your own leadership skills and strengths, and also identifying your own leadership brand or your signature style. Because I would posit that it's as unique as your DNA that's made up your personal experiences, those strengths, and is guided by your passion and your vision. So as you start to take kind of inventory of some of those things in time of reflection, what are those things that you enjoy doing? Start jotting those down. And over time, you'll start seeing some things align related to skill sets as well. Now, I also mentioned the Strengthsfinder exercise. You can purchase the book, and within the book is the Strengthsfinder Assessment as well, that explores about 34 themes related to gifts and talents and will help you to be able to see your top 5. I also use this as a tool with my students and completed the assessment myself.
Well, that's a great resource there to have that in your book. The other thing I wanted to talk a little bit about is this whole notion of addressing conflict, and you talked about that when we first started chatting for this episode. How can conflict play a role, or addressing conflict play a role in leadership, and how does a great leader deal with conflict?
Well, I think the first caveat related to conflict is that it's natural. It's something that cannot be avoided. But I think as a leader, oftentimes we forget those two premises, and we try to run when there's a conflict. But the reality is a conflict can be an opportunity to engage key stakeholders, to bring people together, to hear things from their perspective, to challenge your ideas, because leaders also need opportunities for personal growth and development. What if, for instance, one of my colleagues that I potentially have a conflict with can provide me with some insights related to blind spots that I may not see? What if the conflict is related to how we operate and impacts our bottom line? Maybe there's some disagreements related to that. I think opportunities to bring all the voices to the table, I really focus on within my book, The Lawyer is Leader. It's really about bringing the collective together for engagement, to exchange ideas, to share stories. But what really happens in that process are some values related to building respect, building unity, and building a sense of community. So conflict in that way, over time, I've realized based upon my research and personal experience that conflict can be a tool to engage in new ways and go to higher heights and deeper depths in your organization and your work as well, as long as you facilitate it in a process that allows for opinions to be shared, that there's a safe, neutral environment to share them. And then also, once you get through that process, what are your goals and how will you assess your progress?
Well, those are some great tips you mentioned about how to positively handle conflict. In so many organizations, it seems as though, conflict is something that's to be avoided at all costs rather than welcomed as a growth opportunity. So it would seem as though it's really the leader, whether that's a manager, a vice president, a president, et cetera, and how that person chooses to deal with conflict, whether it's, through bullying and put downs or through a forum for open discussion, that will make all the difference in an organization.
I agree. A leader has a unique opportunity to set the tone on how they'll build a community with healthy dialogue and healthy engagement.
Well, Artika, as we wrap up today's episode, has there been any type of major shift in leadership that you're seeing today versus perhaps what was out there 30, 40, 50 years ago?
The most drastic shift is looking at leadership not as the position or a title, or maybe a pyramid with the leader on the top and then the followership at the bottom at the base. Really, it's creating a new image of leadership. And I would say more of a circle, that you're really collectively engaging in a process, as we talked about, of building the strength of your team members, of really engaging and knowing that everyone has a potential to lead, maybe not all in the same situations, as far as maybe you can't have 3 leaders for one project and you have just one leader, but it's also acknowledging that within that team that everyone has value and something to add. So I think the most radical change is really focusing on individuals and figuring out what are the gifts and talents of individuals, and then moving from the individual basis to the collective, of looking at how we can organize together to manifest change, whether in our organizations, whether in our communities and local groups and school boards or so forth, and then now also at the global level. I think that's also a radical change as well, that leadership is going beyond our national borders to a whole global community on how can we leave the world a better place than how we found it, as really being a critical question for many.
Oh, that's pretty profound. I love what you said about leadership emerging from a hierarchical process to a circular process. I've always thought that everybody within an organization, regardless of what position they might hold, and of course, organizations tend to be diagrammed out using flow charts, from the top to the bottom, and it's a very hierarchical looking kind of thing. But even those that in positions that tend to be, toward the bottom, be that, kind of a customer associate or administrative assistant or a member of the janitorial staff, can all bring value to the organization, but they just have to, the leader just needs to seek their input, and they can actually lead very well in specific capacities within an organization if they're if the managing leader permits that.
Yes, and recently I've been studying the labor movement that emerged, one of Dr. King's final campaigns with the sanitation workers in Tennessee. And one of the things that he talked about as we think about work, he gave a pretty strong message that really what work is about, no matter if you're the CEO or the sanitation worker on the ground, the reality is that work is about human dignity and a reflection of that. And if we keep that in our minds, in the forefront of our leadership, it gives us a sense about what type of workplace we will be creating, moving beyond just a 9 to 5 or a work title to really a type of vision where everyone's engaged in the process of making the organization go as far as possible and to exceed the goals and the vision to move further each and every day.
I think that's probably the dream of every leader, of every manager, and every organization across the world. That would be awesome to achieve. Artika, as we close today's episode, how can people find out more about you and your book and what you do?
I would encourage people to visit my website. It's www.artika, Tyner, Tyner.com. There's a number of leadership resources available. There's also the Take Action Challenge if you'd like to talk about how you'll lead change, and sample chapters for the book available free of charge for download.
Okay, that's awesome. So you've got a great website there with lots and lots of resources for folks. So I do thank you, Artika, for joining me today on this episode of Business Innovators Radio, and thank all of you who are out there listening to Business Innovators Radio. Have a great day.
Thanks for listening to Business Innovators Radio. To hear all episodes featuring leading industry influencers and trendsetters, visit us online at businessinnovatorsradio.com today.